group to go ahead and get started. So welcome, good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining this year's International Women's Day panel in celebration of International Women's Day and also benefiting Girls Who Code. For those who don't know me, my name is Rachel Klepp from Avianos, and it's been truly an honor to help organize and plan this year's International Women's Day panel along with other members of the Avianos Women's Leadership Network Group. We're so excited to have everyone here today with Avianos for an engaging discussion on women's empowerment, leadership, and equity. This is our third year having this panel, Avianos, which is really exciting, and I think is truly a testament to the dedication and importance of this topic at our company. As women in technology here at Avianos, we know how important it is to have these type of conversations and how important it is to raise awareness about the challenges that women face so that we can talk about how to overcome them together and how we can work with our allies and men in our company in order to do so. So today's discussion will be around how to embrace equity, which is actually this year's International Women's Day theme. So we'll be hearing the thoughts and perspectives of a variety of female leaders that you'll see here on the Zoom today, covering the following topics around empowering women in the workplace, overcoming bias, and strategies for combating negative stereotypes of feminism, as well as how to encourage women's leadership from entrepreneurship to senior roles, as well as how to thrive in male-dominated environments, which most of us come from. Now, you won't just be hearing from me today. We have some amazing panelists who you'll see on the Zoom today with their cameras on who will help lead this discussion. So first we have Victoria. Victoria Phillips is the COO of Avianos and responsible for the integration of Avianos business practices with a focus on creating processes for delivering high quality client work and bringing teams together for clients. She has over 20 years of delivery management and business operations experience, and Victoria specializes in really orchestrating the successful delivery of those complex initiatives. We also have Megan Hahn with us today. Megan is the Vice President of Customer Experience at Link Logistics Real Estate. She's responsible for relationship development and management, as well as delivering consistent experiences of all the Link Logistics customers with a goal to transform the traditional tenant to landlord interaction to an elevated level partnership. She lives in suburban Pennsylvania with her husband, Brian, a beautifully blended family of 4 kids and a very spoiled German Shepherd. We also have Julia Dane. She is the Vice President of Adobe Experience Cloud and responsible for Adobe's data and insight and customer journey management business in the Corporate Solutions US segment. Since joining Adobe and Marketo in 2015, Julia has worked in several senior management roles, as well as partnering with financial services, insurance, high tech, manufacturing, and travel and hospitality businesses that have grown to be some of the most successful verticals within Adobe's business globally. We also have Alex Batorf, who is a 3-time veteran entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of Get Shit Done, the collaborative platform supporting women entrepreneurs in this growing game-changing business to break out of survival mode and scale impact. Prior to founding Get Shit Done, she was the co-founder and CMO of Zip Fit Denim, which is a multi-million-dollar venture-backed e-commerce company that was acquired in 2019. She's been in Forbes, Business Insider, and has spoken around the nation at Harvard and Turner Broadcasting and many others. And last but not least, we have Shalyn, who is our moderator for today's discussion, as well as the Senior Marketing Director at Avianos and responsible for marketing and communication strategy, partner marketing, overall brand awareness. She drives the company's brand strategy, positioning, marketing campaigns, content, as well as our thought leadership efforts. So as you can see, we have the panel packed today with a lot of amazing ladies who have done some amazing things in their career. So I'm really excited for you all to take part and engage in this discussion. So before I hand it off to Shalyn, also want to call out that we will have the chat open on the Zoom. So if any questions come up as we go through any of the discussion topics today, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll have some time at the end for a Q&A session to go over those specific questions you have and hear the ladies' input and thought. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Shalyn Barrow.
Thanks, Rachel. And thank you, ladies, for being here with us today. We're very excited to host this again, as Rachel said, for the third year in a row. And every year we get such great engagement on this discussion because it's really critical to the success of our company and all the companies that we work with. So thank you again for dedicating this time to chat with us about this very important issue. To set the stage about the importance of this topic, I wanted to just give the audience a few stats. So those in the top quartile for ethnic diversity perform 35% better than their competitors. So when we think about why this matters and we have to make a case, there's always a business case for increasing diversity, whether it's gender or ethnicity. It's important to make sure that we have a diverse group making decisions for our organizations because it affects the bottom line, not to mention morale. And this year, for the first time, the number of women CEOs broke 10% for the Fortune 500. So we should all be really proud. It's amazing that we have hit this new number. It's lower than I would like, but it's higher than it's been. So we can all appreciate and celebrate that for International Women's Day this year. So with that, let's kick it off with our questions. And I want everyone to answer this first one because I think it kind of sets the stage for the entire conversation today. But what does International Women's Day mean to you individually? And why do you think it's important to celebrate International Women's Day or International Women's Month? Let's start with you, Victoria.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So International Women's Day is a point in time that we have every year. But to me, that is just symbolic. It is really about a longer term movement that, happens over a long period of time, right? This is not women's rights, women's equality, all of that isn't something that, we finish after a couple of years. Like we have a big flashy ad campaign or we throw a couple of events and like, yay, we're done. That's not how this works, right? If we want real lasting change, we have to continually work at ingraining it into our workplace, into the culture. That means everyday actions, like little things that you do every day and, being aware and just, being more collaborative and, thinking more diverse. But it's also momentous occasions. And so International Women's Day to me is one of those momentous occasions. You need both of those things, right? The big and the little. But together they create this, sort of set of tools that we use to advance our passion and our cause. And, over time, and, maybe it's a lifetime for some of us that it will take to make change, real lasting change. But that's what it means to me is a symbolic thing that is, although it's one day, it matters all year, every year.
I love that. Moment in time, piece of a puzzle. Megan, how about you?
From a very personal level, I would say it gives me the opportunity to reflect on how far I have come from the beginning of my career to where I am today. But as far as for all women, it's called international for a reason. While great strides have been made here domestically in the US, around the world, it's not so much the case. We can't allow those things to go unnoticed. While we have the privilege to get an education and forge our own paths, we have female counterparts around the world who do not have access to education. They are legally not allowed to go to school. And we're missing such a great knowledge base by restricting women from doing what it is that they're destined to do. I had the privilege yesterday to hear Malala speak, and one of the most profound things she said was, things will remain the same as they are unless someone steps up to do something about it. Today, International Women's Day is that reminder that we need to keep going.
Absolutely. And I would say too, we oftentimes forget that there were a lot of rights that women in the US didn't have just in the 70s. like buying a house. And I had a conversation just yesterday, even though when my husband and I bought our house together, his name, it was first on our documents. And I'm like, hey, I managed all of this administrative stuff. So I think there's a lot of instances like that across the world. And you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that everyone is focused on continuing progress everywhere. Julia, how about you?
I want to build a little bit on what Victoria shared, in that I did a little research and was surprised to learn that actually International Women's Day has its roots all the way back to the early 1900s, where women first started advocating for change. And it started with 15,000 women marching through New York City, demanding shorter hours, better pay, and voting rights. And we have come a very long way from that time. So I factor that in. What's important to me is that we have to continue the work that so many brave women before us have fought for. And then, Megan, to your point, we've got to fight for global women's rights as well. But I do think the women who marched through New York City in the early 1900s would be proud to see where I believe most of corporate America is today. And I am an example of the proof that a woman can do exactly what she wants, even in a historically male-dominated world. And I feel like I have a responsibility to be a showcase for other future female leaders. And I have learned that people are watching us and people are observing, and that when we may not know it, we are inspiring future women leaders. And that is a responsibility that I take very seriously.
Absolutely. I think just some people forget that you're being watched all the time, and setting the right example is fantastic. Thank you, Julia. Alex, what does it mean for you personally?
Yeah, I'm happy I'm in company where this didn't become very fluffy. So good. I'm very happy that these are the responses. I'm very radical. I come from a social justice family. So, I mean, quite frankly, for me, International Women's Day is not that symbolic because I do this work every day for women. But it is something that I'm working on to make sure that we do celebrate the wins. So for me, the symbolism this year is to say, hey, let's celebrate how far we've come. But, you know, basically what everyone else said, there's still so much work that needs to be done. And I think these moments are an opportunity for us to look at, well, here's how far we come, here's what's happening. For example, I'm currently based in Mexico City for the winter. A lot of people don't know that the crime against women here, so femicide, has grown 137% since 2015. And so they were marching in the streets yesterday. So like a lot of people have said, there are a lot of privileges, especially non-women of color and women that live in the US have, that the rest of the world does not have. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we are honoring those privileges and using it as a tool versus weaponizing it. And a way that we use it as a tool is to educate ourselves and making sure that we are figuring out what resources we have. It's not to say try to do something that you don't have the capacity to do, but everyone has something that they can do, whether it is sending money, whether it is speaking up to your superiors. If you're in rooms with people that many don't have access to, making sure you are part of that education process is really important. So I would say that's what it symbolizes for me.
That actually sets me up for my next question perfectly. And I'll start with you, Alex, and then ladies, if you want to add in at the end, feel free. But what are the most effective ways to counteract the negative stereotypes of feminism? I feel like in the news, once you get this momentum, then there's always kind of a backlash of like, whoa, calm down. So what do you think about that, Alex? I'd love your perspective, especially given where you're at right now.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is it's twofold. On one end, it's not your responsibility to really shape how other people perceive something that is important to you, especially when it is attached to your life. Especially, I mean, in Mexico City, like femicide is a real thing. Women are getting killed just because they're women. Like that is a real thing. So that's not their responsibility to, and I think we do this a lot with marginalized groups, whether it's women, people of color, is asking us to take on the burden of what other people think when it is our lives and livelihoods at stake. But I would say the other side of this, and you see it a lot, especially in the political environment we have around the world now, globally, is there has to be space for really hard conversations. So when people don't believe in your perspective or they might not be on board with it, I think it's also important to make sure that you're having conversations and having that curiosity as to why. Because it's not helpful when, and mind you, I'm very social justice radical and I'm ready to fight anytime, but I also understand that I get more done when I'm able to create space for people that do not have the same opinions and beliefs as I do and ask them, well, why is that? And without coming from a place where we are just fighting at each other. And it's okay to agree to disagree, but I think I have been able to at least shift some perspectives by listening and hearing people out, even though it might hurt me to my core. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you believe this, because this is literally you not liking who I am, and I have nothing to do with that. You know, I was born this way. But also asking those questions to get them to the point where it's like, wait, why do I believe that thing? So I think, it's being unapologetic. This is not your responsibility to carry the burdens of other people's beliefs, especially when they are denying your existence and who you are. But the other side of it is also having a little bit of curiosity and creating space for conversations that are really hard.
Great answer. Wow. And Megan, I saw you shaking your head. Do you have something you'd like to add?
I harken back to what you said right in the beginning. Is the two words you probably don't want to say to a woman is calm down. The way that we as women react with passion, and we really want to stand up for what we believe in. The term feminism innately carries a very negative tone to it. When you hear the word feminism or it's used in the media, quite often you will hear man-hating, aggressive, angry, when the true definition of feminism is the advocacy of women's rights. There is no emotion attached to that. It is just us standing up for what is right and what we believe is true. From a workplace standpoint, corporations have come a very long way in giving us that space, and it starts at the hiring process. We have to we can't get a seat at the table if you can't get your foot in the door. But that's not where it ends. Hiring women, hiring based on different ethnicities should be a priority, but that continuing education of all employees within a workplace brings those issues to light and gives us that space to have what Alex mentioned, those difficult conversations. We can't make any incremental changes to turn into a monumental one until those things happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Victoria or Julia, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'll add one sentence, 3 words, and that is Alex and Megan have just shown it. It's intelligence, ability, and confidence. And when you display those traits, when you're having a conversation with someone, they realize they're having a conversation with the person and they don't see you as a woman. I think when I have conversations with people, I don't think they're thinking to themselves, oh, she's smart for a woman. I believe they think, oh, she's smart. And that's exactly how I feel about Alex and Megan in the few minutes I know that they are smart.
And thoughtful.
Yeah.
It's not, yeah, exactly. Victoria, you were going to say something?
Honestly, it was just an add-on of what Julie was saying, which I didn't know she was going to say that, but just that, I think it's important to, because I agree with everything Megan was saying, like the word feminism has gotten a bad rap. And so let's, put that aside. However, there are very real stereotypes, and the only way to counteract them is to show the truth of who you are, an intelligent person, a thoughtful person, a, business-minded person. So, you have to actually figure out what are those stereotypes. Like this is one, women are too emotional and take things too personally, right? Or they need to be liked, right? That is a stereotype. What is the best way to combat that? Show that that's not true, right? Be your true self. And as you progress in your career, you are going to make decisions that some people don't like. You have to be confident in that. You have to know that you're not going to please everyone all the time. You cannot be a people pleaser. Do you think men are sitting around trying to be people pleasers? Absolutely not. And so, I just would give some practical advice of like, actually see what those stereotypes are rather than, throwing them out and dismissing them, because whether they're true or not, the perception is there, right? And that is real, the perception. So you have to tackle those. And the best way to do that is to be your true self, and authentic self.
I love that. And I'll add something here. I remember coming from a meeting where I passionately supported my thoughts. Surprised to anybody who knows me, right? And I left and I was overthinking. I asked a male colleague, I was like, did I overdo it in there? Was that too much? And he was like, no, what are you talking about? And I realized I was totally in my own head about it. And it was not, nobody else felt that way. I was putting that on myself and realized, oh, okay, I'm able to confidently defend my point of view. So all of these points are amazing. Thank you, ladies. And they actually lead perfectly into the next question, Megan, for you. The rise of women is not the fall of men. We talked about this earlier. This is not a zero-sum game. So what do you think about that? And how can we work with men to realize that all boats rise?
I emphatically agree with the statement. The gains for one does not equate a loss for another. I'm probably the only person in my family who isn't in the legal field. And I walk into my sister's house and they have one of those legal scales that has the two sides. It's not about tipping the scales in the other direction. It's finding a balance where it's in equal levels. Advocating and fighting for more equality does not mean that men are going to lose anything. It's just acknowledging that some of the challenges that we face aren't what they face. And our gains to get up to that level isn't going to take anything away from them.
Like,
Perfect.
you see that meme, something like about it's not a pie, right? So if you eat more pie, it doesn't leave less for somebody else, right? It's not finite, right? We're not talking about women rising above men. We're talking about getting to the same level playing field, right? That us rising doesn't push them down, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Alex or Julia, anything you'd like to weigh in?
No, I agree. For women to succeed, men do not need to fail. End of story.
Yep. Maybe we'll just make that the summary of this conversation. So Julia and Alex, I think you could weigh in on this too. We'll start with you, Julia, but how do you succeed in a male-dominated environment? Adobe is massive. It's a technology firm. You're in sales, which is largely men. How do you feel like you succeed?
So I've been in technology sales my entire career, which is 25 years, roughly. And interestingly, I have never not succeeded in that male-dominated environment. And when I think about it and I wonder why, I sometimes think, was I just lucky? But I really think I never expected to be treated less, and therefore I never was. And I do know, because I do mentor women and up and coming leaders, female leaders, and I think that they have definitely had different experiences. I was fortunate that I did not. And I think, again, for whatever reason, I just didn't think to not be who I was. And because I was capable, I was successful. And I continued to promote throughout the environment. Most times I was the only female in the room. That is still true today. And while I notice it, I really don't care, because it has no relation to how I need to do my job.
you've earned your seat, regardless of gender.
Right.
Alex, being in entrepreneurship and VC and all that goes into entrepreneurship, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so, on paper, so I've been building companies since I was 19. This is my third. I'm pretty unemployable at this point, but I'm pretty good at building businesses. So thank goodness for that. But I've had to always navigate rooms with men, especially, I had a VC-backed company. It sold, like, most of the rooms I was in was with men, having asked for money or whatever. But I think it's really important to provide context. I'm a sociologist by background, so I think in context all day. I think that we don't see how our environments shape us too. That allows us to be in the positions where we say, I'm confident moving this way. So while I am a Black woman, I'm a biracial Black woman. My father is white. And I was told by someone society perceives as at the highest pecking order as someone telling me every day, you were the most fucking amazing thing on earth. You were the best thing since sliced bread. So my shaping is coming from that. And also my mother, who's like, yeah, you could do anything. And then giving me the tools to be able to do that. So whereas, myself and Julia, we can go into rooms, a lot of our environments shape us to do that. And so a lot of women might not have that environment and that shaping. I have a lot of friends that did not have that and had to overcome a lot of those. And that's not to say I've had imposter syndrome, I haven't had lack of confidence. It's just saying that gave me a foundation. So I think that's really important to point out, because there's a lot of things around confidence for women and all of that I think we miss the mark on that very often. And that is a privilege I have. But I would say for those who did not come from that shaping and that environment and that type of support, I think it's also important, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, when we talk about how men will go into rooms with confidence, like there's that one chart where they say men will give you 10 reasons why they're ready and women will give you 10 reasons why they still need to work on it and perfect it. I had this conversation yesterday with a friend around women really need to go after, if it's at, if it's even at like 75%, do it. Just go after it and go scared. That's the thing. There's like, confidence doesn't mean that you're not scared. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have anxiety or all of those things. It just means that there's a way that we're socialized and shaped that makes us get in our head the way that men aren't. And so there's ways that we can push ourselves forward, and also leveraging the people around us to be your hype women or men. I would say that was a big thing. I had a lot of male allies and women that were like, you're amazing, you can do this, but it really requires us to get out of our heads and ask for that support. And that's really hard when you're socialized to do it perfectly and do it on your own. So I do want to make sure that we're talking about that, because we are socialized a little differently, and environment does play a huge role in how you show up, but there's ways around it. You just have to seek that support.
Perfect. Yes. Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
I would say that it's the culture of a company too that can really make or break that success factor. Earlier in my career, I've been in commercial real estate for over 16 years now. And in the beginning, it was an environment that pitted women against each other, which created a very negative and toxic environment. So the success was, you had to claw your way and you had to knock someone down to get ahead. And innately, that's not in my nature. But as I progressed in my career and found better cultural environments within an organization, building women up in that male-dominated field has completely changed my trajectory. And to lean in a little bit on what Alex said is the power of yes. I've said yes to projects and roles and positions that in my head I'm saying there's no way that you're going to be able to pull this off. But put on a stone face and say yes, and fake your way until you figure it out. I'm 3 roles in with that same perspective. I'm in a much more comfortable place now than I was 2 years ago, but terrified is probably the best word I can use but it didn't stop me from saying yes.
So a little stretching can go a long way.
It can. And I was capable. I just convinced myself that I wasn't.
And I think that goes back to what Alex was saying around the environment shaping you, whether it's our little girls or, you know, our junior female employees, making sure that they know they have some space to fail a little bit. Because guess what? You need to stretch out of your comfort zone in order to grow. And making sure that our junior female employees and employees in general feel like they have a little bit of latitude.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback off what Megan said around, I love that she said that I lifted other women up as I was rising. That is not everyone's experience. So I know that Avianos is based in Chicago. I was in Chicago for 10 years. That's where I built my first 2 companies. And I loved the tech space and building there, but something that was said behind closed doors very often, especially of the women entrepreneurs who were in the top 1%, a lot of times we did not feel supported by other women. So I think that needs to be something that we call out, because it's really, we can have these conversations about, and oftentimes we ask people who are trying to climb up to do a lot of brunt of the work, when in order for them to gain access, they need the people that are the gatekeepers to open doors for them. And so I think it's really important, and I know like everybody here on this panel, and when we are in positions of quote unquote power, is that we need to create that space for them to have room to step up. Because I found that, you know, there was tropes around, well, women are just bitches or whatever. I never subscribed to that. What I found when someone didn't want to help me, especially if it was a woman, was a lot of times fear. It was that it took me so long to get here. And that's changing a little bit today, but I'm talking about like early 2000, mid 2000s, where I felt like, wow, why is there so much resistance? And I saw a fear that if I look back down, I might fall back, right? And sometimes we're even harder on our counterparts than we are on anyone else, because we're like, well, it was so hard for me, so I'm not gonna give you any breaks either. But I'm like, that's not, if we're talking about passing down crowns, like our ancestors didn't do that. They said, I'm gonna create way for you, and I might not even see the benefits of my labor. And that's the perspective we need to take. So I think it's really important as allies, men and women, to also be very clear about our positions of power and making sure we're creating space versus asking people who are, I don't like the word below, but who are underneath us in roles that need our support to also be very active in opening those doors for them.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, this is a perfect segue. Thank you, ladies, for being so honest. I think the next question goes to everybody, but we'll start with you, Victoria. How can we encourage more women to pursue entrepreneurship or senior leadership roles in their career? We've got 2 perfect examples that Megan and Alex just shared, but anything from Julia or Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of building off that idea of what Alex was just talking about, this cannot be a selfish thing. You're not in it for women's rights for yourself only, right? You have to, you know, care about helping women, period. And so, you know, one of the best ways that I have found in, you know, encouraging younger women or women starting out in their career, or, you know, just, you know, other people I've, you know, encountered, is to take the time and get to know them and build a relationship and tell them your story. The best advice I've gotten is not something that happened in a performance review or some formal work thing. It has come from getting to know successful women and understanding more about how they got there and the things that they dealt with. And it's all very, you know, anecdotal and you know, it's very relationship based, but it really makes a difference in how they got to where they are. That was so inspiring for me, you know, not only to see like, oh, this is how, you know, this is what can happen, but then you actually see how they did it, right? It's very practical at the same time. It's like, oh, they encountered this, or they were up for this promotion, or they asked for this. So I truly believe in that this is not about like a selfish thing. You have to care. If you care about this, you care about it for women overall. And that means you're taking the time to get to know other women and teaching them what you have gone through and what you have learned. Like when you were saying our ancestors or our grandmothers or great grandmothers or whatever, right? All those stories are passed down generation to generation, right? That didn't happen in some formal process. And so I just want everyone to always be thinking like that. Yes, you have your job. Yes, you have your responsibilities, but you also have a responsibility in educating and training up other women in an informal way.
Absolutely. Julia?
Yeah, and the thing I'd add is again, when speaking to other women, first and foremost, you have to believe you can do it. I don't know where self-doubt comes in, but it was there for me too. And it's been there for me for a lot of years. And even today, sometimes you have self-doubt of what that next step might be. So I think first and foremost, we have to encourage other women to believe you can do it, regardless of the personal load you may carry. I mean, I have met brilliant women that are also managing a house full of young children, and they're still in very high level positions. And then there's, everyone has a different load. So first is belief. And then just personally, the reward of solving bigger challenges is greater than I could ever imagined. If you had told me 15 years ago that I'd have the responsibilities I have today at Adobe, I'm excited and impressed that I'm here doing what I'm doing. But more than anything, it is so rewarding because the level of problem solving that I'm doing today, I had no visibility to 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago. And so I'm still learning, and that is so rewarding. And that's a reason to encourage women to continue down the path of what you want to do, because you will always learn.
Perfect. Perfectly said. We actually have some questions from the audience, so I'm going to veer from our previously planned agenda because I think these are great questions. One question is, women tend to be assigned lower tactical level work when on a team project. How do you advise overcoming and addressing this type of unconscious bias professionally? This is the old, oh, she'll take notes, right? I'll answer this first and then feel free to weigh in. I don't take notes anymore. I see who's in the room and who has the least responsibility on the account. That person, regardless of gender, they take notes. So don't raise your hand to do it. Sometimes I think as women, we want to be helpful. And sometimes you're like, well, I'll take that. And it becomes natural. So I think maybe look at the room and see who the best person for that task should be, and be okay with saying, no, I actually need to focus on a more valuable piece of this project. Can we have so-and-so do it? Anybody else want to weigh in?
I think someone said this earlier around culture. Again, I think that a lot of times there are cultures created in work environments where, I know this is huge in finance. Seriously, I have so many friends that had to go through this, where showing up at a certain time and leaving after your boss is a real thing to be promoted. Showing that you are a doer, entrepreneurial spirited. A lot of these times that's jargon used to say, work really hard so we can see you. And sometimes that's interpreted as, well, what are ways that I can keep inserting myself? So I would say absolutely, create those boundaries. But again, I think this comes from the top, that there has to be leaders within the organization. Like, my job in my company with my team as the CEO is to make sure that I'm allowing the people on my team to do the things that they are best doing, or they are best capable at doing. That's my job as the CEO. So the executives in the room, the managers in the room, that is absolutely their role to be able to say, actually, no, is it Susie? You don't take these notes. Maybe Billy needs to do it. And make sure that you're managing that, because otherwise people that are in these organizations that want to be promoted, want to be seen as a team player, are going to go above and beyond because they think that's what's going to get them noticed. So I think that is the role of managers and executives, to shape the environment and the culture in that way.
Totally true. Make sure that they're accountable to dividing that work. I'll add too, we've got technology, folks. Let's try to use some sort of AI. ChatGPT could probably take your notes for you. Record the session and transcribe. Let's work smarter, not harder. A second question, and I think this is also perfect. Can you speak to the power of vulnerability? Sometimes people who believe in you want to help and contribute to your team's success if you ask or delegate, because you can't succeed by yourself all of the time. Vulnerability, I'm going to toss this to Victoria, because one thing Victoria said early on joining Aveanos was that her leadership style is a little different. And Victoria, I loved what you said, that you lead with your own personality, not the way that people expect you to lead as a COO. So can you speak to the power of vulnerability?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to, what we talked about earlier about being authentic, right? And if you are authentically who you are, and that doesn't mean you don't adapt to different situations, of course you do. And that's just smart, whether you're talking to men, women, or whoever. You should be reading the room and, figuring out what what's going to be most successful. But I think it's really just making connections with people, making relationships when you show your true authentic self, which everybody has some vulnerabilities. Nobody's tough as nails 100% of the time. Nobody is, I'm all business and, no fun and games. That's just not, no one is, well, I guess somebody is out there, but most people are more human than that, right? And so when you can share all those sides of yourself and not just appear like I am, only this person or I'm only all business, you're going to make better connections with people and you're going to make those relationships. And that is going to help you have other people, collaborate with you on whatever you're trying to achieve, whether it's a project or an initiative or, selling a new idea or whatever it might be. And so I just think it's really important to not, put on a veneer all the time of who people expect you to be. Oh, because you're a COO, you must be like this and you must be all, all business and all tough. No, we're all humans. And I think showing that part of yourself goes a long way in making better relationships, which goes a long way in making a better work product, whatever that work might be.
Authenticity. Absolutely. Megan, Julia, Alex, anything you'd like to add?
I would say that I approach management style as a team sport, and being honest about your own struggles with your peers or with other, both men and women, within your organization does bring that level of authenticity and makes you more human. Solving problems sometimes takes more than one person to get a good result. So I embrace sharing my story, because what I've gone through, I know that I'm not the only one who's gone through it. So to share my struggles or, what I perceive to be faults may help someone else who's feeling the exact same way.
Yes. I found when I was early in my career, I tried to put on a different persona at the office, trying to be more polished. I tend to cuss a little bit, as my team knows. I have a different background anyway. But I realized it never worked. I always somehow ended up being myself, and it worked so much better. And I find that it helps me relate to my team members or my clients or other women or other men so much better if I can not put so much energy into being a different person and I can just be myself, and it just feels more authentic and natural. So perfect. And actually our next question was going to be, what can men do to help achieve equality? And I got a question from the audience here that I think is a little bit more nuanced. So I'll add this in. I would be interested to hear from Julia or Victoria, as leaders in technology, which has a reputation for being one of the most male-dominated fields. How did men aid in your success? Similarly, for the whole group, how can the men listening help embrace and support equity in the workplace? So let's start with Julia, then Victoria, and then I'll open it up to Megan and Alex. So Julia.
Yeah, I'll start with just what I consider to be the small stuff, right? And that's just being inclusive. I mean, it's super easy for the guys to go grab lunch or dinner. And I get that. And I even experienced that. We were all coming in for a QBR, and 3 guys from the team were on the elevator down as I was going up, and they're headed out to dinner, and they hadn't invited me. And I don't think they purposely said, let's not invite Julia, but they didn't realize the impact that had on me. And then I had to be brave enough to tell them that really bothered me. And they all felt terrible about it, because they didn't think about it. They said, we didn't think about it, but invite us, right? When we're having dinner. Last week I was with 5 men and I was the only woman at the table. at dinner. Don't put us at the end, put us in the middle. Don't sit by the person you like the most in meetings. Come sit by us, include us in the casual conversation, get to know us. And then that builds the personal relationship with them. Then I feel like when you are working with smart, capable women, you learn that about us, and then you start to see us more. And I said this much earlier, you see us as a smart person and not necessarily just as a woman. And so it's really small stuff, but those things make a difference.
They really do. I love that. Put the person, whether it's a woman or a junior person or somebody new from out of town, put them in the middle so that they can be involved and you can get to know them better. Victoria, how about you?
Yeah, and just real, I'll make my point in a minute, but and just honestly, based on what Julia said about putting people in the middle of the table, like, isn't that just smart in general? Not even about men, women, or whatever, right? The new person, include them, right? Like, just be thoughtful and, considerate and inclusive, just sometimes it's really basic stuff. But anyway, building on all that, I agree with all that. I would love, and I've been fortunate to work with some men that have thought this way, but I would love to see this more, that they think about business more holistically, right? The business and success is not just financial results, or maybe ultimately it's financial results, but more goes into it than the way you always did things, right? Are you thinking about how well your teams collaborate? Are you thinking about how good your communication is within your company? Are you thinking about career development, and do people feel nurtured? And there are all these other facets that lead to better financial results. And those come with diverse teams of people, right? And if you keep hiring the same people that you always did, or, let's say some man departs some role and you go to look for somebody else to fill that role. Well, we just went and found the same exact guy, clone number 2 of, the same guy. That is not, you've lost an opportunity. You had a moment to think more broadly about what could make this business better, or what could make that role better, and to think more holistically about it, rather than just, well, Joe was always successful, so now we're going to bring in Sam and he's going to be just as successful, right? So use that opportunity to think more broadly, because a diverse set of thoughts, experiences, and perspectives will lead to better financial and business results. And so I would love for everybody to think like that more often.
Absolutely. Megan, did you want to add anything?
I would. So Julia had mentioned that, she didn't get invited to dinner. I'm sure that every one of us on this phone call has experienced this at some point in our careers. For myself, this is something that always bothered me. I've been playing golf since I was 4 years old because my dad had all girls. He didn't have any sons to teach the game that he loved so much. So I started playing when I was 4 years old. Do you think I've ever been invited on any of the golf outings? Nope. Weekly, when the men of a company meet up to go play basketball, do I play? I can if I tried, but women aren't invited to those types of outside the office types of events. And I don't think they understand the impact that has. And I too, Julia, did say something, be like, hey, that really did hurt me. That hit me to my core. Even something as simple as not being invited to play fantasy football with all the boys, right? I love football. I'm upset. I know the stats. I know the players of all the teams. Just being left out of those small things can grow really badly within your corporate culture, because if you're doing that in extracurricular, what are you doing inside? So what men can do, be an advocate and kind of identify and understand how those decisions impact your female counterparts, because it is hurtful.
It's not only hurtful personally, but professionally, because as those people build bonds outside of the office, they tend to go to them first with the good project, or,
Right.
It creates different sorts of disparity outside of just having a fun game of golf, right? You're absolutely right. And just, I think to your point, I just want to reiterate the solution. It's just to be more thoughtful and considerate.
Be thoughtful and acknowledge that those types of decisions do have a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Alex, I'm positive you've experienced this as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, all the time. I would say, again, this is twofold. So there's the side of our male allies and what they can be doing. So in the tech, entrepreneurial space, they call it pattern matching, like the way people make decisions about investments or whatnot. So I think people do that socially too. Oh, she doesn't look like she would play football. And I think someone asked us in the audience around vulnerability. I think there's a fear for women to come off as emotional in these professional environments. So sometimes that kind of prevents us from speaking up to say, you know what, that actually hurt. And then you see two people here that just said, hey, I told my male colleagues that was hurtful to me, And so I think that is an exercise in understanding not everyone's going to receive it well, but there's always going to be, I always say, all you need is one champion. One champion. You don't need everybody on the team because you can't eliminate everyone's bias. That's not your job. And it's just finding that one person. And then that does require vulnerability, just saying, hey, this thing hurt me, or hey, I would like to be invited to that thing. On the other side, for I think women, when we are trying to get into these spaces, I actually have a fun Aviano story back when there was just the founders. That's how long I've known these guys. It was Chris Dalton, and I remember also Gibson, and my last company, we sold, we did denim. So we basically created it to fit you, tailored it in-house, our technology matched you. And we went to go fit the founders at the very small Aviano's office. I'm sure you guys have grown much more now. But I remember I had met Chris at some random event, and I just went up to him. I was just like, hey, we wanted to go, my intention was, I want to go fit their employees for jeans. Who do I need to talk to? The decision maker. So I went up to the people and I'm like, hey, let's go. Can I fit you and your colleagues for jeans? We went to the Aviano's offices and we just had a great conversation. And we were also looking for Chris to invest too, full disclosure. We were like, let me show you this process, right? But we had a great conversation. They welcomed us with open arms. We had great, they made intros for us. They were like, well, we're not going to make the investment, but here's this. And then to this day, full circle, Gibson has been a really great growth ally for my company, helping our founders. And so I give that example because I think it also requires us on the other side. We absolutely need male allies because they tend to have and be in the positions of power. So that is their responsibility. But what we can do to empower ourselves is putting ourselves out there and also saying, why not? Why not me? Why shouldn't I go up and have this thing? So what Julia and Megan both said was, I expressed this thing, and so I could create room for myself. So they have the information to make the decision next time when they go out. And so I would encourage anyone who is dealing with that in their career, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, is really how can you put yourself out there and be vulnerable, taking that step, telling people how you're feeling, and then going with that. That's really the biggest thing. I know someone asked about vulnerability. That's a great way to be vulnerable. Just, you don't need to perform. You don't need to put on a show for anybody. Just be yourself. And if something comes up where it was hurtful or you just want to take that shot, take the shot.
How bold, but be vulnerable. It's bold and uncomfortable. And I think to all of your point, other men and women are not mind readers. So maybe they didn't realize they left you out. So I think absolutely just raise your hand and say, hey, that wasn't cool. Let's try that again. So I have one more question from the audience that's very timely. With so much economic uncertainty and talk about a possible recession, and this is across all industries, how would you encourage women to take the leap to make a dramatic career change or pursue entrepreneurship? I will start with Alex, and then if anybody wants to weigh in, just chime in at the end.
Hot take, I do not think everyone should be entrepreneurs. The same way not everyone should be janitors or doctors. There's so much glorification of entrepreneurship in the media. It is not good. Entrepreneurship, like all of your careers, is really hard. There's a specific skill set that is required. So there's a difference between saying, I'm gonna go be an entrepreneur versus I wanna make and create additional streams of income. That is completely different. Something one of our growth allies is talking to our founder community about is how do you create additional streams of income within your business? So you'll hear people say, like a Tony Robbins, like, the average millionaire has like 7 streams of income. Okay. And then they're like, Tony Robbins has like 26 different businesses. Context matters here. He has 26 different businesses that he doesn't run. He has 26 businesses that other people run. So I think it's really important where you're getting information from to make decisions on how can you protect yourself. Something that came up and I offered to the room that I thought was really insightful is how do you monetize your intellectual property? I think that is something across the board that's really important. Whether you're an entrepreneur or not, you can work within an organization and still have other things. So what is your skill set? Can you become a thought leader on things? Can you have your own podcast where and don't go out and start a podcast or streaming podcasts and no one actually listens to you.
Alex, I have a podcast.
Yeah, I can get it, but it's really identifying what are you really passionate about? What are you really good at? There's like hedgehog, ikaki, whatever. I think it's really important for people not to say, I just need to become an entrepreneur. No, you should not. Please don't do that to yourself. Specific people need to become entrepreneurs. But I would say outside of that, everyone, even myself including, how can I make additional streams of income beyond what I do in my day to day? So my day to day is my business. Like I want to get to the point where I'm like, my business doesn't necessarily have to pay me my salary. I get it from my intellectual property that I'm monetizing. So I offer that to the group because it's very easy to say, just go in and jump in. Fun fact, especially for women entrepreneurs and why I do the work I do, is women own about half of businesses in the US, but generate 4% of total revenues. About 90% of women entrepreneurs earn less than 6 figures. So a lot of times they're actually better off being in a corporate environment. That's what my organization's shifting, but that's gonna take time. So like I said, I think there's an opportunity to not just say, I should just become an entrepreneur, the recession's coming. It's saying, how can I leverage these other skill sets and then look at how I can monetize my intellectual property? And there's a lot of opportunity for that. I have friends who are in corporate who have side hustles as well, and that's what they use to invest in properties and all of that. And I'm like, power to you. So don't just become an entrepreneur because some guy on YouTube told you to. Really look at your skill sets and see what you can monetize. And maybe you could be an entrepreneur, but look at monetizing your intellectual property.
Julia, I'm going to ask you to follow up on this because I think an organization the size of Adobe, there are so many ways you could work at Adobe. There are so many different focuses. How would you recommend somebody at a large organization look at their role differently if maybe they're feeling burnt out or they want to shift to do something different, but they don't necessarily want to leave the organization?
I think it goes back to just, you have to have confidence that you can do it and that you are going to go make the change, especially in a place like Adobe, because Adobe is, by the way, one of the highest rated, best companies to work at year after year. And this is by far the most unique, inclusive culture I've ever experienced in my lifetime. And so just advocating for yourself, having the confidence, having just the belief that you can do it and advocate, advertise, talk, meet with people and go for it. You've just got to go for it.
Perfect. Megan, did you want to add anything?
I would say never undervalue the power of networking.
Yeah.
We're all responsible for building our own brand, whether that's within your own company, whether that's outside in social organizations or what you do. I only within the last, I'd say 5 to 6 years have realized how much value there is in making those connections with other people. I, for one, just reading the question in the chat made me have a small anxiety attack. I'm like, I don't know if I would ever be able to do that. I just internally, I just cringed. I'm like, oh, just having to make that decision. I'm not the person cut out for that. So to the person who asked the question, if that's what you choose to do, I applaud you. But it would terrify me, absolutely terrify me.
Victoria, anything you'd like to add?
No, I was going to go with the relationship angle. It's just what Megan was saying with making connections. It's relationships are so important in helping you figure out. You learn different things from talking to people and getting to know people, and it just helps you figure out what you may actually be interested in or what may actually, move the needle for you. And if you don't have those, if you don't broaden your horizons and get those different experiences that can be quite different from your own, you will be in a box, going down a tunnel. And that's fine too. But if you want more, as you started with this question, if you want more, to seek different opportunities and challenges, you have to spend time with other and different people.
I'll add on that. I remember I was looking at switching careers and I didn't know what I didn't know. So I reached out to somebody who was pretty high level for an informational interview, thinking if he says no, no big deal. But if he says yes, I'll get the information I need to make an educated decision. And he did say yes. And we had a great conversation about a company that I had my eye on. And it turned out the leadership wasn't that great. Turns out they weren't very open-minded. They didn't like people who were opinionated, which I am. And I would not have been a good fit there. It would have been a terrible career move. But I wanted it so bad. And had I made that move, I would be miserable. I wouldn't have lasted 6 months. So I would recommend to these ladies' points, be a little bold, write the email to see if you can get more information and meet people who know more than you know. A lot of times people want to help other people and it makes them feel good to do that. So as long as you limit the ask, don't ask for 30 minutes and take an hour. That's not a good move. So that would be my advice on that one. We have 2 questions left. The first is, how can we measure and track progress toward achieving gender equity in the workplace? So I wanted to have one of our last questions be something actionable. What are some ways that we can actually measure and track and benchmark so that we know, are we doing this effectively or not? Who wants to start? You want me to pick one? I'll pick one. Julia, how about you?
Can you ask the question again?
Yes. How can we measure and track progress toward equity, whether it's gender or ethnic? How do we start to track and actually measure progress?
I think you just have to have concerted effort, and I know at Adobe we are very, very focused on. Years ago we were focused on pay equity, right? And just by percentage. So we have teams of people that this is what they focus on. So I think you have to document and pay attention and have goals, and you have to continue to strive to meet those goals and then continue to increase those goals. So X% at certain levels, X% pay equity. And we've been at pay equity for years again, but I think Adobe does it very well in that they set goals, meet them, and then continue to stretch themselves. And so other organizations, teams, you should do the same. You have to set a quota for yourself or a goal and be committed to meeting it.
So actually, Alex?
Yeah, I would say you can't improve what you don't measure. I'm sure everyone has heard this on their team. With goals you're setting for a company, right? You're trying to drive revenues. It's the same thing when it comes to creating an equitable environment. But I think we have to look at what's the difference between diversity and inclusions? Because often, sometimes people would think diversity is actually just adding more women to the room, and then you don't see women of color, right? So that's really important to look at, how are we being inclusive? What are the benchmarks? And then measuring that. So within our company, whether it's my team, whether it's the what we call growth allies, like a Gibson that comes to speak to our community, we are tracking who are they? Are they male versus female? Are they people of color? And then that tells me as the CEO, who do we need to bring in to make this more inclusive? Because, our community is 60% women of color, which is really important to me. Who is coming in to educate them is also very important, because they need to see people that look like them, but they also need to see other perspectives as well. So that's something where we know those numbers like the back of our hand. I know the numbers of male versus female on my team, diversity in terms of ethnicities, geographies, things like that, but also who's coming in to educate our community is also really important, because that shapes their outcomes. So yes, I totally agree with Julia in terms of you have to really define what those metrics are, and you have to track them and see how you are measuring against that progress.
Of course. Megan?
Transparency. Companies that embrace and publish their DE&I reports. I, for one, have compared a prior year to the current year to see what kind of progress has been made, and a corporate commitment to not just putting out that report for the sake of putting out the report, but using the data that comes from those reports to target exactly where the improvements need to be made. And we are a data-driven society. Reporting a metric is one thing, but taking that metric into an actionable item is another. I'd be very wary of a company who does not publish or have that readily available to see. A lot of information can be gleaned from seeing exactly what their commitment is to diversity in gender, diversity in race. So the transparency, I would lean in on that one.
I love that. Victoria, do you have anything you'd like to add there?
No, I mean, everybody said some great points. I think maybe the only thing is, just going back to when you're hiring and you're looking at people to bring onto teams, like are you tracking not just who you hired, but the candidate pool that you're looking at? And for each role, are you looking at a diverse set of candidates? Again, going back to what I said, like that you're not just hiring Sam to replace Joe, right? And looking for an exact profile of exactly what you had, but are you thinking more holistically about the role and what would make it successful, and making sure that you bring in a broad set of candidates that have different perspectives that can still achieve the same goal? Because there are just multiple ways to get to a goal. And I think we get in a rut of this is the one way to do it. And it would behoove all of us to, think differently, that there are multiple ways to do it. And so perhaps looking at a different type of person, different background, different set of experiences, skills, you name it, can bring something extra to the role that you had never considered before.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that 35% more competitive, right? If you have more diversity, you can be more successful. We have a question from the audience again here. Do you feel your company embraces equity? How and where could you improve? I feel like we answered this one just a little bit just now, but if there's anything anyone would like to add. Personally, the where would you like to improve is interesting, because even if you're doing a good job, how could you do it even better? If anybody has anything they'd like to share.
I would say that I'm proud of what my company, they're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And from a hiring perspective, is going out and seeking candidates that we need. Just because you put a job posting up on LinkedIn or you put it on your website, that doesn't mean it's going to get into the hands of someone who could possibly be a superstar in that role. Each one of us works in a very defined business environment. Real estate people tend to bounce around within other real estate companies. It becomes a very small world. But there are skill sets and talents that are applicable within our organization that doesn't necessarily come from the real estate route. So making that conscious effort, and I've seen it in our hiring practices and our talent acquisition, is strategically going into certain spaces to post these jobs to get a better candidate pool.
I like that. It's not just letting them come to you, it's actually finding those diverse.
Finding them. Yes, it is. Hiring people is a two-way process. It's not just this is what we have, wait to see who comes in. You have to actually make an effort to go out and find the people that you need.
That's a great suggestion. Alex?
I would agree. For us, we're twofold, because it's our team, but also the community we serve. So on one end, it is to Megan's point, like you have to go out there. Like it always baffles me when people are like, how are you finding all these women? And I'm just like, they're everywhere. Where are you at? Like, so for example, like you'll hear like, I was on the golf course, and it's like, you have someone like Megan that grew up that was on the golf course, and like, my grandfather's been trying to get me to golf for years, and I'm like, kill me. No, I'm not. Where am I going to be? Not at the golf course. Right. So it's like, for me, it's, yes, I totally agree. You have to go find them. And I think to what we were talking about earlier around tracking and transparency, it's really about like, how are we going out to find them, tracking where we are, benchmarking against that. And then more importantly, how do you create inclusivity in the process? One thing our company does on the hiring process is we implemented a scorecard, because it's so easy to have a feeling about someone. And again, it's like, oh, I feel like I can be friends with this person at work or whatever. And when we implemented, I remember we were bringing on our marketing manager. There was one girl that I thought was going to kill it. Like she was going to be the one we hired. But when we looked at the raw numbers of how we all scored, the woman we actually ended up hiring scored like 20 points higher. So we would have gone with our gut and a lot of our own biases. We wouldn't have chosen the right candidate for us, who is still with our team today and is extraordinary. And then on the other side with our community, the tracking and transparency is really important. Like I said earlier, women entrepreneurs make up half of entrepreneurs, but bring in 4% of total business revenues. And a lot of that has to do with ethnicity in terms of performance. So Asian women perform at the highest in terms of revenues at like 189,000 a year. White women right below them at 147. And then Black women are at the bottom at 24,000 annually on average. And so in our community, my job, if our goal is to help women move through the pipeline, revenue pipeline, it is me and my team's job to make sure that we are being equitable and meeting people where they're at, because that's what equity is. Equity is meeting people where they're at and giving them the resources so they can get to the point that they need to. And so that is our job on our side of our community, is making sure that we're being equitable with them to say, hey, you're a little further behind because of circumstances. Let's make sure we're giving you the resources you need to get ahead. And I think you can do the same with your teams as well. But again, you have to have tracking and transparency in order to do that. And you have to have really clearly defined goals for what that looks like. We know exactly, because we're always looking at that 4% number and how it affects our community and how we're moving and inching ahead. And I think the thing we're the most proud of is our founders in our community perform 54% higher on average in revenues than their other women entrepreneur counterparts that aren't in our community. So that's how we track it. And again, tracking and transparency is really important.
I love the scorecard idea because I think it applies to so many different areas too. What a great tool. Well, the last question for the group here is, what advice would you give your younger self? And I know this is broad, but it's a great one, especially earlier you guys spoke about different anecdotes and sharing your own personal career experience, and how just sharing that information helps younger people who are maybe in the thick of it realize that there's a way out. But what would you share with your younger self? And we will start with you, Megan.
I would say give yourself a little bit of grace to the younger me. To be able to own all aspects of oneself. My mom would always say, own it, warts and all, like own who you are as a person. Don't let other people's perceptions of you or their analysis of you cloud your own judgment of who you are. Early, my younger self, my high school self, possibly my college and early career self, always let that doubt of me be influenced by others when all along I knew who I was. So I would say, don't let other people's judgments of you define who you are.
I love that. Julia, how about you?
So, Alex, tip of the hat to the name of your company, GSD, just get stuff done, right? And then Megan, to you, I love golf, but I picked it up later in life, and I would give anything if I had picked it up earlier in life, because it really is the ultimate sport and very enjoyable. And Alex, maybe someday we can get you out there and see if you can pick it up. But seriously, it's for me, it was be an example, be confident, be yourself, and hug your mama every chance you get.
Amen.
Yeah. Victoria?
Yeah. For me, and I think we touched on this a little earlier, but it rings very, very true for me, is embracing opportunities. It definitely in my younger years of my career, just that little bit of imposter syndrome, that, fear of the unknown, that, tendency to overanalyze every situation. Like, I don't know if I can do this, or, a new project or a new role was, presented to me as an option. Well, immediately I would think about all the reasons it wouldn't work, or all the reasons I wouldn't be good at it. And it took a lot of time, and to realize, like, go with it. I started watching, male peers, and they just say yes to everything. Like, they had no idea how they were going to do it. They're just like, just say yes and you'll figure it out. And I learned to realize over time I could rely on my experiences and my instincts, and I would figure it out. And you just have to have that belief in yourself that you will figure it out. I mean, if it's completely wrong, you will learn, and you will learn from that, and that has a whole other set of benefits and good things that can come from learning from a failure. But you won't even know if you don't try. And so just have confidence and embrace the opportunities that come your way. Don't say no out of fear.
Yes, I love that. Alex?
Wow, I'm going through this again. Trust yourself, honestly. I think back to all of the times, there's specific ages up in my life, and I have so much life ahead of me, where I'm like, wow, I just did not give a fuck, quite frankly. I just went after it. And I realized it was when I was younger, like my 19-year-old self that started a company, I had no experience. And I was pitching investors, and people were saying yes. I'm like, who are you? And I look at that now, and I'm just like, wow. So I realized as I got older and got more experiences, I stopped trusting myself, because I kept shitting on myself, saying, I should know this, I should, instead of being a beginner again. So I think probably it's twofold. Allow yourself to be a beginner again and trust yourself. Your gut is always going to tell you whether something's right, whether it's that bad relationship, that bad role you were in, all of the things. Just trust yourself. I mean, I remember resigning from my last, a company I built that was successful on paper, and I resigned because I'm like, I need to do the next thing. I went through probably months of me tormenting myself, because I'm like, I should get us to the exit, I should do this, I should. And I'm just like, no, your gut is telling you it's time to build the next thing. And if I didn't trust myself, I wouldn't be building my legacy today. So I would just say, trust yourself.
With great advice. I'd like to add mine in here, and it's similar to all of yours. And I feel like I've come to terms with it through experience and growth. But it's don't shrink. You don't need to shrink yourself to fit a different mold. You can be fully authentically yourself. And if it fits, great. If it doesn't, pivot. So don't shrink. On that, I just want to say a huge thank you for such a real conversation. To your point earlier, Alex, how refreshing is it to hear actual responses and not some canned, quotes. So I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of your time and your experience and sharing it with us at Aveanos and all of our folks who joined. And thank you to the people on the line for joining us. Hopefully you learned something today. Feel free to reach out if you have follow-up questions. Those of us at Aveanos will get it to the right person. But thank you. And thank you for celebrating International Women's Day. On that, I think we'll wrap it up.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It was nice meeting everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.